For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Shotgun Spratling for instant analysis of the 2021 Pac-12 Media Day. We're outside of the W Hotel in Hollywood, California, and Shotgun, it seems a little bit normal. We returned back to an in-person Pac-12 Media Day event. We got to talk to coaches and players in person, got to see some old media friends that we haven't seen in a while, so we got to return to some normalcy today.
A little bit different than pressing the raise hand button on Zoom. Getting to read and react players, their reactions to things, see how they're trying to frame things, to ask a follow-up, those type of things. Being able to pull a player aside and do a one-on-one, or just pull him in the corner and chit-chat for a minute. Talking with some of the other media members about what's going on in their area. All the small things that Media Day kind of entails and gives you a better idea of finding out about an Arizona or an Arizona State a little bit more in depth from the the local media guys and finding out about them. We got to do all that. We got to listen to the new commissioner. We got to talk with the coaches, and just kind of a lot of new things being thrown out there right now. But a lot of different things were touched on. But it just a little bit closer back to that fans in the stadium in the fall. That's what we're getting closer and closer towards.
Yep. And as you mentioned, we got to hear from George Kliavkoff, the new Pac-12 Commissioner, for the first time in person. I'm just curious, what were your overall thoughts or your first impressions?
He talked about a lot of different things, from the NIL, realignment, obviously a big topic, the vaccinations. But the thing that stood out to me is he said that they were going to emphasize the revenue-driven sports. Football, basketball, those are going to be the two things that they really focus their energies on as a conference, because they know that's what's going to drive everything else, rather than treating them as an equal to everything else. When they create all the money and bring in a lot of the money for all the other sports, that's going to be the first thing they focus on. And it's not going to be Larry Scott style where parity is great. No, they want to get to the college football playoff. They want to have teams there, so they're going to push that even more about having championships. Clay Helton, championships, he mentions it all the time. Or George Kliavkoff, that was something he mentioned as well, is about getting back to championship, being championship contenders, getting back to those games. And so that's a big thing for him. A lot of other stuff was discussed, but that really stood out to me.
Yeah, it was an interesting day, given the fact that in the outside world of college football, realignment is happening, and happening quick, it seems. Oklahoma and Texas officially applied for membership to join the SEC. So, of course, George Kliavkoff was going to get a lot of questions about realignment. What do you have to say?
Well, one of the interesting things was that he said there's been a lot of different organizations, universities that have reached out already to the Pac-12. Now, is that a Big Ten, Pac-12 merger? Is that, the Pac-12 consuming the other Big 12 schools? A lot of different variables could be in there. But it sounds like there's some names of schools that you might not be thinking of. So it sounds like the Pac-12, it's been a hopping phone line, with people calling and showing interest in the Pac-12. And one of the interesting things that Kliavkoff was asked afterwards from the media was, what will the accreditation, will that be an issue? The AAU accreditation, because of the academic standing of the Pac-12 schools, he said that's not going to be an issue for them as they go forward in realignment. He said if you think back to when they went from 10 to 12, Utah was not an AAU accredited school, yet they got the accreditation after joining the conference. So that may be something that they look at as far as conferences. So I just don't think that that's going to be something that stands in the way. It's not going to be a hurdle like some people thought it might be.
Mm-hmm. This is also the first time that we collectively could talk about name, image, and likeness with players and coaches. I thought it was interesting. We heard some quotes from players that we normally wouldn't hear. Jaden Daniels talked about his own personal pizza he has in Arizona with a pizza chain. And then Max Borghi was talking about, hey, I watch TikToks, but maybe if TikTok sponsors me, I'll make some videos. So some phrases and things we wouldn't normally hear from players.
Yeah, and you heard Kayvon Thibodeau talking about his connection with Phil Knight, and he brought out his rings. He's talking about he wants to eventually build a school. Just a lot of different topics rather than, hey, who's the toughest offensive lineman you face?
Yeah.
It was a very broad spectrum media day, it felt like. The NIL I thought was interesting. Keaton Slovis was asked about his Clutch Sports, the agency that he's with, about how that came together. He said Rich Paul, which is a name NBA fans might know. Yeah. He said that's a guy that was a part of his recruitment from the very beginning. We also, Drake London confirmed that he is with an agency as well. So how they're kind of going about it is a little bit different. Keaton Slovis talked about how he was being very patient with it, the process of finding the right agency, whereas Drake London also found an agency, but talked about how he's not even focused on NIL right now. He's focusing on the season, how things go about, that'll be, determined, if someone comes reaching out to him. And that was kind of the thing. You looked at the quarterbacks, Keaton Slovis, Jaden Daniels are talking about the deals they've already made, where someone on the other side of Arizona State, Chase Lucas, their cornerback, talked about how he's not focused on it at all. He's just focusing on football. He's in a relationship with football right now. He talked about it like it's his girlfriend. He said, we love each other. We're spending so much time with each other. So he's not really focused on that at all. He said that would be the advice he would give to younger players too, is focus on getting to the next level, and then those things will come as you progress. So it was interesting to hear kind of the different angles, especially with quarterbacks. Obviously, they're the face of the franchise, face of the program, and it seems that's the same way with the NIL right now.
And Keaton Slovis made it clear that, if he doesn't perform on the field, it doesn't matter about NIL. He has to focus on football. And he was asked a lot about 2019 Keaton Slovis, 2020 Keaton Slovis, and interestingly enough, he said he doesn't want to be either.
Yeah, he said he felt like he got back to that level of 2019 in the second half of spring. He said, I didn't want to be there. I want to exceed that. And he feels like he's done that this off season in the summer workouts and stuff. So we'll see when we get to fall camp if we notice a difference there. But that's something else that Drake London said as well. I asked him the same question and said, hey, that's what everybody wants to know. Are we going to get 2019? We're going to get 2020 Keaton Slovis? He said, honestly, it's not 2019. It's better right now. He said he's throwing the ball with more velocity, more zip on it, putting the ball where he wants to, which is the big thing that Keaton Slovis said. That was the big issue he had last year. He said it was the first time in his life that he hadn't been able to put the football where he wanted to. And Drake London's talking about how he's stinging his hands. He's beating up his hands a little bit with the velocity he's throwing it with. So those are all positive signs for USC and where this offense could go if Keaton Slovis is back on the right track.
And that's something specifically that Keaton Slovis mentioned about this offseason, how he's putting in the work to make sure that he is the Keaton Slovis he wants to be in 2021. And he mentioned, as a starter, I haven't had a real normal offseason. And so he was talking about the work that Bobby Steiner has done this offseason and just the work that they're doing as far as receivers. He talked about the new wide receivers in the room. Taj Washington, Jake Smith just came to USC. So it's an interesting new time for Keaton gelling with these wide receivers.
Yeah, definitely. And it starts with the work in the weight room. Being able to strengthen that arm, and that's where some of that velocity. He looks noticeably thicker from where he was when we saw him as a high school senior coming out. He has definitely changed his body there, and you can't saw him Bobby Steiner. It's either Bobby Steiner and the boys or Robert Steiner, one or the other, Keely. Okay.
I'm sorry.
But I think that there's a lot of positive mentions of the work that Bobby Steiner and the boys are doing right now. From everyone we talked to after the PRPs. Now some of the pictures, everybody's freaking out about the pictures that we posted so far coming out of the PRPs, but they're talking about how it's functional strength conditioning. All the stuff they're doing is focused on movements they're going to do on the field, and Keaton Slovis talked a little bit about that, how it's helped him, that's helped in the recovery of his arm and helped strengthen that arm, is that the movements and motions that they're having him do are focused on what he would do on the field as well. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, he talked about the new wide receivers. That's a topic from both Drake London as the new leader in the wide receiver room, but also from Keaton Slovis talking about got a lot of unique weapons, is the way he kind of described it. Unique skill sets and guys that can do different things. Now, will we see them actually try to use them in a different way? That's what I'm curious to see.
Well, Keaton specifically mentioned Malcolm Epps, the tight end transfer from Texas, and he said, that really boosts the tight end position, and that could mean different things for Drake London, who could move around. And I tried to get it out of Drake London, where are we going to see you this season? And he wouldn't fully tell me, but it seems like USC definitely has more options on offense.
Yeah, it didn't sound like Drake London was fully going to be an outside receiver. He didn't make it sound like, that's where he's going to be established and that's the only place he's going to play. Sound like he could be moving around a little bit. And I think that may depend on some of those new guys that are coming in. How quickly do they take to the playbook? How quickly do they connect with Keaton Slovis? A lot of talk between both Slovis and Drake London about the work those guys are putting in after the PRPs. Said London told me they throw 4 or 5 times a week. Wow. Every time they run, have any kind of team thing, they throw afterwards with Keaton and the receivers. So they're getting that connection, because that was one of the things we had an issue with a little bit and we wondered about in the spring. Keaton to Drake look fine.
Yeah.
Keaton to anyone else, a little bit different.
Yep.
So we'll see how quickly those new guys that coming in can get connected with Keaton, and how quickly the offense can take that second-year leap in year 3 now after the COVID year.
Mm-hmm. We also heard from Clay Helton. I don't think there's anything too new from him today. He did mention that there's a couple soft tissue injuries heading into camp, but overall the team looks pretty healthy, and he hopes to keep it that way throughout all of fall camp.
Yeah, and he didn't even specifically name any of the injuries. Talked a little bit about NIL, a little bit about vaccinations, a little bit about everything.
Yep.
But nothing really new there, nothing really groundbreaking. One of the more notable things he said was, the expectations that come at USC. And he's talked about, winning championships is the expectation at USC. And he said, hey, you can win every game except one, and if it's that last one and it's the championship game, then people are going to be sad. That's what he said. People will be sad.
He didn't say it like that, though.
Not exactly like that, but, that's what he's, he knows the pressure that's on him. There wasn't much new for him to say. He wasn't asked a lot of questions about personnel or anything. It was very broad-based questions, so that's why I don't think we got a lot of new information out of Clay either.
Yeah, this usually happens when there's more national media or less beat reporters, because you don't get those detailed questions answered. But we will get questions answered soon. Fall camp starts next Friday, August 6th. Media will be able to watch all of fall camp, and so that will be exciting. Returning to the field, we will get some overhead views from the pool, which we did see in spring. But Chuck and I kind of think of Pac-12 Media Day as like the marker of, hey, it's ending for us. We're about to be in football soon.
Yeah, every time Pac-12 Media Day comes around, you're like, all right, I got one last weekend of summer before things get really ratcheted up. And that's what we're going to see, is the intensity that we saw in the spring, the variety of practices. That's one of the things we're going to be watching for in fall camp. Can USC carry over what they did in the spring?
Yeah.
Or is there going to be a step back? That's going to be the first thing I'm really looking for that first week of practices. Are they continuing the growth, or are we going to be worried about where this team is going into the season? That first week should tell us a lot, even though there's a couple of non-practices, as the defensive staff would say.
Yeah.
Those don't count. They didn't wear pads. But once they get in the pads, I think we'll see where exactly this team is at. And Clay Helton mentioned they have some soft tissue injuries. Didn't specify anyone, but doesn't sound like there's outside of the Brandon Keely injury.
Yep.
Doesn't sound the Max Williams. Doesn't sound like there's anyone that they're really concerned about not being ready for fall camp or not being ready for the season when they start.
Yeah. Alrighty, Shotgun. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up here in Hollywood?
No, it was good to be back out in Hollywood and seeing everyone and kind of getting to pick the brains of Keaton Slovis and Drake London, seeing where Keaton Slovis is at mentally, because that's one of the things he did talk about. It wasn't just an arm injury. He said the confidence, not being able to throw the ball where he wanted to. He looks in great spirits, sounded in great spirits until the very end when he kind of lost his voice a little bit.
Yeah, he was struggling.
And USC went very last in the scrums, and he was losing his voice a little bit and coughing. And Drake London quickly, drink some water, man. Just make sure he's taking care of his quarterback.
Yeah, of course.
And they had some kind words from each other when they were asked about one another. So it was fun to see it. I don't know if someone needs to come up with a nickname for the duo of those two, but they've kind of grown up together, and it's interesting to see them come to media day together after putting together a terrific back half of the 2019 season, connecting on some really big plays in the 2020 season.
Yeah.
Makes you really look forward to what could be for this duo in 2021.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for 2021 Pac-12 Media Day. For Shotgun Spratling, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.